They should have never opened that door, but what if it was calling them by name? In a quiet suburban street, House No. 41 stood abandoned, sealed shut, forgotten, and whispered about in hushed tones. When a group of friends break the rules and descend into its locked basement, they don't just uncover secrets, they awaken something ancient and hungry. What begins as a dare spirals into a ritual of fear, identity, and betrayal. Bound by blood and haunted by truth, they soon realize some houses don't let you leave the same person you were when you entered. This is Beneath House 41, and it remembers everything. It started with a draft. Not the kind you feel on your skin, but something that seemed to pass straight through the marrow of your bones. When Ben Carter first stepped into the town of Edaville, West Virginia, he didn't come looking for ghosts, only answers. And yet, every street, every flickering porch light, and every mailbox with peeling paint whispered the same thing. You shouldn't be here. He drove in just after dusk, the kind of dusky blue that turns street signs into silhouettes and makes your rearview mirror feel like an open door. The rental car's tires crunched on gravel as he pulled up to the edge of Sycamore Street. He killed the engine and silence swelled instantly, thick and whole. Ben stared ahead. House No. 41 was a rotting Victorian, sitting alone at the end of a cul-de-sac that never showed up on GPS. Its windows were all dark, but not empty. Dark like ink dropped in water, pooling unnaturally in the corner. The porch sagged, the shutters hung askew, and the chimney looked scorched. But the most unsettling part was how it looked lived in, like someone, or something, had returned recently and tried to make it theirs again. He stepped out of the car, boots landing on cold gravel. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves, copper, and something sweet, like overripe fruit fermenting in the soil. Ben zipped his jacket, reached into the back seat for his leather-bound notebook, and flipped to the page labeled House 41, Local Myths. No known owner on county records. Built in 1893, burned in 1912, yet no fire report exists. Whispers of children missing between 1986-1993. All last seen near Sycamore Street. Local superstition. Don't look into the cellar window after dark. Ben frowned. The deeper he had looked into the town archives, through old newspaper clippings, death notices, and microfilms, the more he found stories of erasure. Entire families vanished, records misplaced. Yet House No. 41 remained, like a wound the town never acknowledged, festering quietly at the edge of its memory. He stepped toward the house. The closer he got, the more wrong the structure felt. Not just abandoned, but displaced. They could belong somewhere else. The porch groaned as he climbed the steps. His flashlight flickered. He paused. From this angle, he could see the basement window, partially buried behind overgrowth. It was small, barely wider than a shoebox, and blacker than anything around it. He could have sworn, for just a second, that the glass moved, as if something on the other side leaned forward to meet his gaze. But it was gone before he could look twice. Ben shook his head. He wasn't here for ghost stories. He was here because his sister Morgan disappeared 11 years ago, and House No. 41 was the last place her cell phone pinged before she vanished. Nobody in Edaville remembered her. The sheriff said they never had a girl by that name come through. But Ben knew better. She texted him that night. Ben? It's real. The stories are real. If I'm not out by dawn, don't come for me. He didn't listen. The door creaked open without him touching it. Ben froze, heart drumming behind his ribs. The air beyond the threshold was impossibly cold, like a freezer left open for days. He took a breath, tightened his grip on the flashlight, and stepped inside. Dust spiraled in the beam of light. The living room looked like it had been preserved mid-century. Floral wallpaper peeling at the seams, a velvet couch eaten through by moths, and a grandfather clock frozen at 3:17. Strangely, there were no cobwebs. Everything was covered in dust. Yes, but not abandoned. There were indentations in the carpet. A teacup on the side table that hadn't cracked. A book left open mid-sentence on a rocking chair that still faintly swayed. Ben whispered to himself, "What the hell?" He moved deeper into the house, noting every creak, every shift in temperature. The stairs leading down to the cellar were just past the kitchen. He hadn't planned to go down there, at least not yet, but something tugged at his thoughts. There's a kind of pressure behind the eyes, like a memory you weren't supposed to have, forcing itself forward. His phone buzzed. Ben nearly dropped it. He fumbled to unlock the screen. Unknown number. You shouldn't be inside. He spun around. Nothing. Another text came through. She never left. A chill ran down his spine. The walls around him felt suddenly closer, as if the house had inhaled. Every surface whispered. He backed toward the kitchen. His flashlight beam landed on a photograph taped to the refrigerator. A girl, early 20s, black hair, flannel shirt, smiling wide on the front porch of House No. 41. Morgan. The date scrawled beneath. Oct 12, 2013. He reached for the photo, but as his fingers brushed the paper, a high-pitched ringing filled the air. The bulb in his flashlight shattered. Darkness swallowed him whole. And then, from beneath the floorboards, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, and coming up the cellar stairs. Ben held his breath. The footsteps continued, slow, uneven, as if each movement was a negotiation with the earth beneath. He backed away from the refrigerator, careful not to knock anything over. The flashlight was useless now, its bulb a scatter of glass shards in his palm. Darkness clung to him like wet cloth, thick and swallowing. He dropped to a crouch, listening. The creaking came in a rhythm. Step, drag, step, drag. It didn't sound like someone in boots. It was softer, barefoot maybe. Or worse, something that didn't walk, so much as scrape itself forward. Ben's hand found the edge of the kitchen counter. He reached along it until his fingers closed around something cold and metallic. A rusted butter knife. Useless. Still, he kept it tight in his hand, the jagged edge biting into his palm, grounding him more than it threatened anything else. The sound stopped. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then the cellar door creaked open. Ben spun. There was no time to run. He ducked into the pantry, pulling the folding slat door shut behind him. Through the narrow slats, he saw it. The door at the end of the kitchen, now yawning wide. A darkness spilled out from it, deeper than the rest of the house. No light escaped from below, but the air that rose up was moist, like something exhaled after being buried for too long. He watched, waited, and then a hand emerged. Not a full hand, fingers first, thin, too long, the skin pale, almost translucent, the nails yellowed and cracked. It groped blindly, feeling along the doorframe like someone trying to remember how to be human. Then another hand followed, and finally, a face. Ben didn't scream, but every muscle in his body screamed for him. It was her. Morgan, or something wearing her face. The face was bloated, sagging at the cheeks. Her eyes were too wide, bulging, and her mouth hung open, drooling a thick black ichor. Hair clung to her scalp in damp patches, as if she'd just been pulled from a well. Her neck was bent at a crooked angle, bones visibly jutting, and yet she was smiling. "Benny," she rasped. Ben nearly dropped the knife. She dragged herself forward. Each movement scraped bone against wood. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, her smile never breaking. "You should have listened." Ben didn't move. Something primal kept him frozen. Not just fear, but recognition. A sense that the person in front of him knew every part of him and hated it. She turned her head toward the pantry. Her movements were jerky, insect-like. "You smell like the attic," she said. "Do you remember the attic, Benny? The box with the teeth?" Ben closed his eyes. He hadn't thought about that in years. A dream, or so he thought. When he was 7, Morgan dared him to open an old chest in their grandmother's attic. He remembered the smell of rot, the soft breathing inside, the bite marks on his fingers afterward. His parents said it was a raccoon. Morgan just smiled and said, "No, it's always been here." "You're not real," Ben whispered. The pantry door rattled. Morgan, or the thing pretending to be her, was now inches away. Her breath stank of copper and mildew. "I'm more real than you'll ever be." Suddenly, the house groaned. A deep tremor passed through the floorboards. Plates rattled in the cabinets. Light flickered from nowhere. And then, the sound of many footsteps from all directions. Ben pushed out of the pantry, slamming into the thing that used to be Morgan. It collapsed like wet laundry, groaning as it hit the floor. He bolted past, toward the front door. It slammed shut on its own. He threw himself at it, twisting the knob, pulling, pounding. Nothing. Behind him, the house breathed in. He could feel it, a sucking pressure, as if the entire place was preparing to swallow him whole. He turned, heart pounding. The living room had changed. The couch was gone. The walls bled with dark stains. The grandfather clock ticked now, backward, and standing in the corner was a figure. Tall, hooded, its face wrapped in cloth, no eyes, no mouth, just stillness. Ben backed away. "What do you want?" he shouted. The figure tilted its head. Then, slowly, it raised one skeletal hand and pointed downward. The basement. The cellar door was wide open again, stairs descending into a red glow that hadn't been there before. "No," Ben said, shaking. "I'm not going down there." The figure took a step forward. Another. And suddenly the walls seemed to grow longer. The ceiling stretched, the floor pulsed like muscle. The house was changing. Ben stumbled back into the hallway, trying doors at random. All locked. Except one. He shoved it open and fell inside. The room was dark, lit only by a single lamp in the corner. Dust swirled in the dim light. And there, on the bed, sat a little girl, no older than 10, pale, silent, her hands folded in her lap. Ben froze. "Who are you?" She didn't answer, just pointed toward the dresser. There, pinned to the mirror, was a photograph. Morgan again, younger this time, holding the same little girl on her lap, scrawled in red ink on the bottom, "Return what was taken before it takes you." Ben's hands shook. "What was taken?" he asked. The little girl finally spoke, voice dry and distant. "You were, long ago." And then the lamp blew out. The room exploded into blackness. From behind, the sound of hundreds of whispers rose like a wave. Names, laughter, cries, all speaking over one another. And beneath it all, a deep voice, low and guttural, not human. "He's here." Ben turned to run, but the hallway was gone. The doorway had vanished. The walls began to pulse, breathing inward. And behind him, a hand touched his shoulder. They always told him not to look into the mirror too long in that house. Ben woke with a gasp, lungs burning, sweat soaking through his t-shirt. For a moment, he had no idea where he was. The ceiling above him was slanted, wooden beams dark with age. Moonlight spilled through a narrow window, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. He wasn't in the hallway anymore. The door, the hand on his shoulder, all of it felt like a fever dream. But the whispers were still echoing. He sat up slowly. Every joint ached. A thick blanket was draped over him, and beneath it, the mattress dipped in the middle like it had held too many bodies for too long. The air smelled musty, layered with something faintly metallic. The kind of smell old houses carry when their memories go sour. Ben looked around. The room was small. Attic, probably. Boxes stacked along one wall, covered in mildew-speckled sheets. A rocking chair in the corner, a cracked porcelain doll sitting in it, its eyes clouded white. The lamp on the nightstand flickered to life with no switch. He didn't remember walking up here, didn't remember falling asleep either. Something had pulled him from the hallway, some force, some presence, and now he was here. The whispers had faded. But in their place came another sound, faint weeping. A girl's voice. Ben swung his legs over the side of the bed. Cold floorboards greeted his feet. He padded quietly to the door, pressing his ear against it. The crying was muffled, but close. Somewhere on the other side, he opened it. A hallway stretched before him, longer than it should have been. The architecture was off. Doorways leaned at angles that defied geometry. Picture frames twisted subtly, like the walls were breathing around them. He stepped out, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The crying led him left. He passed a bathroom, mirror cracked in 3 places, sink stained with something dark and flaky, spring door slightly ajar. Inside, dozens of clocks ticking out of sync, none of them showing the right time. The hallway dipped downward, but there were no stairs. Just a slanting floor, like the whole house had decided it didn't want to follow logic anymore. Finally, he reached the last door. The sobbing stopped. Ben knocked. Silence. He pushed it open. Inside was a nursery. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, revealing claw marks in the drywall. A mobile of yellowed baby teeth spun slowly from the ceiling. The crib in the center was empty except for a single stuffed rabbit, its head hanging by threads, one glass eye missing. In the corner sat the little girl from before, same pale skin, same vacant expression. Only this time she was speaking, but not to Ben. She faced the wall, whispering. Ben stepped closer. "Hey, it's me again." The girl didn't flinch. Her voice was low, rhythmic, like a chant. "He never left. The well still calls. The bones remember." Ben knelt beside her. "What's your name?" She turned slowly. "Balloon." And then she smiled. But it wasn't the smile of a child. It was knowing, cold, crooked. "They buried it wrong," she said. "That's why it came back." Ben's breath hitched. "Buried what?" She pointed toward the window. Ben followed her gaze. Beyond the cracked glass, deep in the backyard, stood a crooked tree. Gnarled, blackened by lightning. Around its base, the earth had been disturbed. A ring of white stones formed a crude circle, and at the center of it, a mound of freshly upturned soil. Ben blinked, and for a second, he swore he saw it shift. "Who's buried there?" he asked, already fearing the answer. The girl stood, her bare feet silent on the floor. "My sister," she said, "but not all of her." Ben turned back to her. "What do you mean?" "She's still in the house. She didn't go with the rest of her." The girl reached for the stuffed rabbit and held it to her chest. "Morgan never listened. She opened it. She made it hungry again." Ben stumbled back a step. "You knew Morgan?" The girl nodded. "She made the pact." "What pact?" But she didn't answer. Instead, the air in the room grew colder. The mobile above began to spin faster. The baby teeth rattled like dice. The light bulb in the corner popped. Darkness rushed in, and from behind the crib, something moved. Ben backed up slowly, trying not to make a sound. He reached for the doorknob, but the wood behind him was suddenly warm, as if breathing. The girl whispered, "It's in the walls now." Ben threw open the door and ran. The hallway had changed again, shorter this time, the lights flickering overhead. The portraits on the wall bled from the eyes. One of them showed his own face now, twisted in terror, mouth open in a scream that never stopped. He turned left, then right, descending a narrow flight of stairs that hadn't been there before. The house rearranged itself while he moved. It didn't want him to leave, and somewhere beneath the floorboards, something began to sing. A lullaby, soft and off-key. The melody was familiar, one his mother used to hum when he couldn't sleep. But his mother never lived in this house. Ben reached the bottom step and found himself in a parlor. The room was coated in dust, and every window had been bricked up from the inside. A phonograph played in the corner, though it spun without a needle. A fireplace gaped at him like a mouth. On the mantel sat a black and white photograph. Ben approached it. In the frame stood a family. A man, a woman, 2 daughters. The man looked like his father, but younger. The woman bore Morgan's eyes, and the younger girl, that was her, the girl upstairs. But standing between them was a 5th figure. Faded, hard to see, its face had been scratched out. Ben flipped the frame. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, 1933, the night we sealed it. He set the photo down, hands shaking. Suddenly, a knock. He turned. It came from behind a boarded-up window. Another knock, louder. Then, scraping, nails on wood. A voice followed, not human, guttural, like bones grinding together. "Let me in, Ben. You promised." Ben backed away. "I never." "You did." Back then, under the roots, he ran from the parlor, the walls narrowing behind him. As he passed the staircase, something fell from the banister. A tooth, large and human. It hit the floor and rolled to a stop at his feet. Ben froze, because the floor beneath him had begun to crack, splinters forming a circle. From below, fingers pushed up through the wood. The floor burst open beneath him. Ben barely managed to leap back as splinters exploded upward, shards of rotted wood slicing through the air like shrapnel. From the yawning hole in the ground, a hand emerged, long, too long, with joints that bent in the wrong directions and skin like cracked leather. It clawed at the edges, dragging something with it, something wet and heavy. Ben stumbled toward the hallway, heart slamming against his ribs. Every breath caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. Whatever had reached through the floor was trying to pull itself up, and it was succeeding. He didn't wait to see the rest of it. The house was awake now. It groaned and sighed with each of his footsteps, the floor flexing under his weight like a living tongue. Doorways blinked in and out of existence. Light bulbs flickered violently. Somewhere above him, a woman's voice sang the same off-key lullaby. But this time it wasn't soothing. It was a dirge. Ben ran back up the twisted stairs, taking two at a time. He didn't know where he was going, only that it had to be away. But the house offered no escape. At the top of the stairs, the layout had changed again. The hallway was now a narrow corridor of mirrors. Tall, antique gold-framed mirrors lined both sides, but none of them reflected the world as it was. In one, Ben saw himself with empty eye sockets, blood trailing down his cheek. In another, he was standing still while a shadowy figure loomed behind him, whispering into his ear. He kept moving, eyes on the floor, refusing to look anymore. At the end of the hallway, a door, massive, iron-bound, with a keyhole shaped like an open mouth. Ben reached for the handle. It was warm. A voice hissed behind him, not in English, not in any human language. The words curled in his skull like worms burrowing deep. He shoved the door open and slammed it behind him. This room was different. The walls were lined with bookshelves, hundreds of old tomes, most of them scorched or mold-eaten. Candles burned in sconces made of bone. In the center stood a table covered in papers, photographs, and a rusted dagger that glinted like obsidian, and pinned to the wall was a map of the house. Ben stepped closer. The layout was labyrinthine, more like a complex than a home. Tunnels ran beneath the house, spiraling out like veins. Some ended in symbols he didn't recognize. Others were marked with dates, 1933, 1951, 1989, and most recently, 2023. Each one was circled in red. A legend in the corner read, "Seals broken, one remains." Ben's fingers trembled as he traced a line from the center of the house to a mark labeled "The Root Cellar." He remembered it now. As a boy, Morgan had once dared him to go down there. He'd refused. She had gone alone, came back white as snow, never spoke about it. Ben turned toward the shelves. One book stood out. Leather-bound, scorched edges, the title in Latin, Maledictum Osseum, The Curse of Bones. He opened it. Pages turned on their own. Wind that didn't belong to this world rustled through the room. The book stopped on an illustration, a diagram of a body missing its lower half, crawling out of a well surrounded by roots. A paragraph was underlined in red. When the vessel is split and the blood oath broken, the house will remember. One will be taken, one will be buried, one will remain, and the fourth will open the gate. Ben backed away. The air thickened. The books began to fall from the shelves, one by one, in a pattern that sounded almost like footsteps. and then the candles blew out. Darkness surged. From behind him, a whisper, "You were supposed to die first." Ben turned just in time to catch the outline of a figure lunging, but before it could reach him, something knocked over the table, papers and photographs scattering. One photo slid to his feet. He picked it up. It was Morgan, in front of the house, holding the same dagger. Behind her, 4 children stood in a circle. One of them was Ben, another was the little girl from the nursery. The others, their faces were scratched out. On the back, "The Ritual, 1998. Ben's blood ran cold. He didn't remember this, but his handwriting was scribbled beneath it. "I didn't mean to." Something screamed raw and inhuman. The walls cracked. Hands reached from the floor again, but this time they didn't try to grab, they offered. One of them held a key. Old, iron, teeth shaped like bones. Ben took it. The hands vanished. The walls fell silent. He turned and ran, the key tight in his fist. The house twisted and churned around him, but this time it guided him. Doors opened where there had been none. Stairs folded out from the ceiling. It led him back to the kitchen. There, hidden behind the pantry shelves, he found the trap door. Iron-rimmed. Black wood. A single lock in the center. The key fit perfectly. Ben paused, hand on the ring. He could hear breathing beneath it, slow, heavy, hungry. He lifted the door, and below him, in the root cellar surrounded by rotting vegetables and broken jars, stood Morgan, but not the Morgan he remembered. Her eyes were solid black, her mouth sewn shut with thread, her arms elongated. She lifted one hand, 4 fingers only, and pointed behind him. Ben turned. The little girl stood at the top of the stairs. She smiled again, and this time, her teeth weren't human. There are places in this world where the past doesn't stay buried. It pulses beneath your feet, waiting for the right name to speak it alive again. Ben couldn't breathe. His lungs refused to obey as he stared at the thing that used to be his sister. Morgan stood motionless in the root cellar, her sewn mouth trembling with something unsaid, something ancient. The threads, thick and black like vines, dug into the corners of her lips, as if silence had been forcibly imposed. Her skin, once pale, now had the undertone of something preserved, embalmed. And those eyes, black as tar pits, watched him not with recognition, but with expectation. Behind him, the little girl took a step closer, each movement emitting the faint crackle of joints that had been broken too many times. Ben backed away from the trapdoor, every part of him screaming to close it and run, but his body didn't move. Instead, he whispered, "Morgan?" and her head twitched. Not a nod, not a shake, just a twitch, a brief, violent jerk like someone yanking her strings. The girl spoke behind him, soft and hollow. "She's waiting for you. She's always been waiting." Ben turned slowly, his breath misting though the air was warm. "You're not real," he said, more to himself than her. Her smile cracked wider. "None of us are real until we're remembered." Ben bolted. The house shifted again, walls groaning and floorboards bending like cartilage. He stumbled through the distorted kitchen, through a hallway that hadn't existed a minute ago, and into a room filled with peeling wallpaper and the scent of antiseptic. It was a nursery. Tiny cribs lined the wall. Each one contained something that had once been a doll, now twisted and burned. Mobile toys spun slowly from the ceiling, though no air moved. A music box on the windowsill chimed a lullaby Ben didn't recognize, but its melody made his molars ache. He backed out of the room, heart hammering, but stopped cold at the sound of footsteps. Not from behind, but above. He looked up. The ceiling bulged. Then a single hand pushed through, followed by an arm, then a shoulder. Something was crawling upside down, moving with unnatural ease between the beams. It whispered his name in a dozen voices, all of them familiar. Ben turned and ran again. Doors opened and closed at random. One room looped into the next like a spiral. He ran down a hallway that folded into itself, emerging in the living room, where the television was on, though there was no power. A static image held the screen. 4 children, blurry, grayscale, standing in a circle in the backyard, their faces pixelated, but their postures unmistakable. He was one of them. The scene flickered, cut to a basement, a camera held by someone's trembling hand. A voice whispered, "Don't go down there, Ben. Don't open it." He shut the TV off, but it flicked back on immediately. "Don't open it," the voice repeated. This wasn't just the house. This was memory. This was ritual. Ben collapsed into the couch, his hands gripping his skull. Flashes came, quick, like lightning behind the eyes. The circle in the yard, the symbols they'd drawn in chalk. Morgan's voice chanting, blood from his own thumb smeared on the dirt. A promise. A pact. He'd forgotten. They'd all forgotten. But the house hadn't. It had waited, patient and silent, until one of them came back. Until the chain could be completed again. Ben forced himself up and moved toward the study. It was the only room that hadn't changed, still lined with books and empty picture frames. He opened drawer after drawer, looking for anything. Answers, weapons, keys. Instead, he found photographs, dozens of them, each one a different child, all in front of the same house. Some were in black and white, others faded color. Some children smiled, others looked terrified. Every photo had a year written on the back: 1926, 1944, 1967, 1998. His year, and all of them had the same inscription scrawled in identical handwriting: The Offering. Ben dropped the photo, bile rising in his throat. It wasn't just about him. This house had seen generations of them, each group drawn in by something: inheritance, curiosity, loss. And every time it took one, just one. He suddenly remembered Jacob, his cousin. He'd disappeared the summer they visited the house. Everyone said he'd wandered off, got lost in the woods. But now Ben saw it clearly. Jacob had been the offering that year, and now it was his turn. But the ritual had gone wrong. Something had changed. Something had remembered too much. He looked up and realized he wasn't alone in the study. Morgan stood in the doorway. This time, her mouth was open. The threads had snapped, and her jaw hung too wide, skin splitting at the edges, like something trying to reshape into words it no longer knew how to form. She didn't move, just stared. Then she lifted her arm and pointed to the fireplace and hesitated, but followed her gesture. Inside the soot-lined hearth, behind a loose brick, he found a box. Small, wooden, wrapped in red string. He opened it. Inside, a length of old hair, a piece of paper folded like origami, and a stone carved into a shape resembling a deformed face. He unfolded the paper. It was a page from a child's journal. "Today we made the promise. Miss Lillian said if we feed the house, it won't feed on us." Morgan was scared. "I told her I'd go first. I hope she forgives me. I hope she forgets." It was signed Ben, age 10. His knees gave out. He didn't remember writing it, but it was his handwriting. The house wasn't haunted, it was hungry. And now it wanted to finish the meal it had started 25 years ago. From somewhere upstairs, the lullaby began again. Only this time, it was sung in his own voice. The air inside the study grew denser, like syrup pulled from a dark well. Vin clutched the journal page in trembling fingers, rereading the lines he couldn't remember writing. The walls around him creaked, no longer hiding their presence. He could feel the house watching, as though the peeling wallpaper had grown eyes beneath its tears, and the floorboards ears beneath every groan. Upstairs, the lullaby continued in his voice, off-key, childlike, but unmistakably him. It wasn't just playback, it was repetition, a reenactment. Ben stumbled back to his feet, gripping the edge of the desk to steady himself. He looked at Morgan, still standing in the doorway, her mouth now slack, her eyes dull with something not quite sorrow, not quite blame. "What did we do?" he whispered. She blinked once, slowly. Then her hand moved. She pointed upward. Ben hesitated. Whatever lay upstairs was no longer metaphor. It was history, circling back on itself, unfinished, reawakening. But he moved anyway, step by step, out of the study and toward the staircase. Each stair creaked like bone under weight, and the banister vibrated subtly beneath his hand, like it too was alive. At the top landing, the hall looked different, longer, thicker somehow, as if time had coagulated in its joint. The wallpaper was newer here, no peeling corners, no mold, but the patterns writhed faintly when he looked too long. And at the far end of the corridor, a single door stood ajar. Light flickered from within. He approached slowly, heartbeat in his throat. Inside was his childhood bedroom, or a copy of it. Everything was as he remembered it. The twin bed with the faded dinosaur comforter, the rocket ship lamp, the posters of long-forgotten action movies. But none of it was dusty, none of it worn. The room felt frozen in time. And sitting on the bed, Ben stopped cold. It was himself, a year-old Ben, legs swinging off the edge, wearing the same blue and Sellers striped shirt he remembered hating. The boy looked up. "You forgot," the child said. "But I didn't." Ben's mouth went dry. "What is this?" The boy, his younger self, hopped off the bed. "We promised, remember, that one of us would always stay. That's what kept them out. That's what fed the house." Ben shook his head. "That wasn't real. We were just kids playing games. You wanted to be the brave one," the child interrupted, walking slowly around him. "You said, 'Let it be me,' and we let you, but you ran." Ben backed away, heart slamming into his ribs. "I don't remember any of this." "But I do," the child whispered. "And now, they're hungry again." The floor beneath Ben trembled. From somewhere below, a dull thud, then another, rising like heartbeats through the foundation. Morgan appeared in the doorway. She didn't enter, only stood there, silent witness. The boy turned and pointed toward the closet. "It's still there, where we left it." Ben slowly approached the closet door. His hand hovered over the knob, shaking. "No more forgetting," the boy said softly behind him. He turned the knob. The closet was deeper than it should have been, much deeper. A narrow set of wooden stairs led down into darkness that smelled of wet stone and burned wood. A damp cold rolled up from the depths, carrying with it a chorus of whispers, children's voices, layered and overlapping in chants, cries, and lullabies. Ben turned to look at the boy, but he was gone. Only Morgan remained, eyes fixed on him. She nodded once. There was no choice anymore. He descended. Step after step, the shadows swallowed him whole. The walls of the tunnel narrowed as he moved, then expanded without warning, opening into a subterranean chamber that pulsed with faint red light. There were symbols carved into the stone walls, childlike and primitive, a crude circle surrounded by stick figures holding hands. Inside the circle lay a pit, its surface rippling like water but reflecting nothing. Beside the pit, something moved. It was Lillian, or what remained of her. The old caretaker stood hunched and skeletal, her face like wax melting unevenly. Her hair hung in gray ropes, her eyes blind and milky, but her mouth smiled, wide and full of recognition. "I've been waiting," she croaked. Ben tried to speak, but his throat closed. "You were the one who offered first," she rasped. "The bravest, the loudest. But your heart was weak. You broke the pact, so the house punished the others." Ben stepped back. "Do you know what happens to a house that goes unfed?" she hissed. "It starves. It remembers. And it calls the lost parts of itself back home." Suddenly, the shadows on the wall stretched. Figures stepped forward, children, all of them wrong. Skin gray, eyes stitched, teeth too long. Some held toys, others carried nothing but silence. Ben turned to run, but the staircase had vanished. The chamber began to tremble, dust falling from the ceiling. Morgan emerged beside him, her sole mouth still open, leaking soft moans of grief. She reached for his hand, and together they turned toward the pit. Inside it, the water boiled, not with heat, but movement. Faces surged beneath the surface, pressed upward, screaming soundlessly. Then one broke through. Jacob, his cousin, the one who'd vanished. His eyes locked on Ben. "Help me," he mouthed. Ben lunged forward, but Lillian shouted, and the chamber exploded in shrieks. The children screamed in chorus, the walls cracked, the pit deepened, and Ben fell straight into the memory he had buried. The circle, the ritual, Morgan bleeding from the hand, Lillian whispering, "Only the brave may feed the house." Ben offering his own blood, "Take me instead," then running away, the pact broken, the house incomplete, until now. Back in the present, as the stone floor swallowed his feet, Ben looked up one final time. Morgan was being dragged backward by unseen arms, mouth open in a silent wail. And above them, the ceiling split. From it descended a figure made of screams and dust, a form stitched together from the voices of every child the house had ever taken. It leaned down to whisper into Ben's ear, "You remember now," and everything went dark. Sometimes the dead don't stay buried. Sometimes they wait for you to remember them first. Ben awoke, gasping for breath. The taste of damp stone clung to his tongue, and his ears still rang with the echo of screams, his own, Morgan's, the children. He scrambled upright, palms scraping against hard wood. He wasn't in the chamber anymore. He was back in the attic, or at least a version of it. The walls were warped and wrong, too tall and too wide, like someone had redrawn the room from memory but missed key proportions. Light slanted in from a window that shouldn't exist, casting everything in a gray, ashen glow. Dust motes floated like ash, heavy and slow. Ben stood shakily, his knees buckling once before he caught himself on a broken chair. The air was thick with mildew and something else, sour like old breath held too long. The attic was silent. No wind outside, no floorboards creaking, no Morgan. Just the faint hum of memory vibrating through the air like a taut wire. He moved slowly, his head pounding with fragmented images. Jacob's face in the pit, the whisper of "You remember now," the stitched faces of the lost children, Lillian's grin stretching past what skin should allow. But even more terrifying was the clarity that now coursed through him. He knew where he was. This was the house between, the liminal space of the pact, a place that only existed when it was fed. He was in the belly of the thing now. As he walked forward, he noticed the attic shifting subtly with each step, boxes melting into old toys, trunks becoming classroom desks, walls covered in peeling drawings that he and Morgan had made decades ago. Crayons scratched out smiling suns, lopsided houses, and one disturbing image, a figure with no face, arms too long, cradling a child in each hand. Over it the word "mother" was scrawled in shaky block letters. Ben touched the drawing. It was still warm. A sudden creak echoed behind him. He spun. Nothing. Then the window burst open with a force that shattered glass into 1,000 silent fragments, each one hovering mid-air like frozen rain. Wind rushed in, not cold but wet, heavy with the scent of lake water and lilies. From the window's black frame, Jacob stepped through. He looked exactly as he had in the memory, 13 years old, shaggy brown hair, eyes full of questions. But his skin was pale, too smooth, almost translucent like candle wax, and his mouth never moved as he spoke. "You said you'd come back for me." Ben's throat tightened. I forgot. I thought you were gone." Jacob tilted his head. "We're never gone. We just wait. You broke the chain. You ran. That's why the others had to stay." "The pact was a game," Ben whispered, guilt boiling up. "We didn't know it was real. We didn't know what it meant, but the house did." Jacob replied, "It always knows." Behind him, the window grew wider, expanding like a mouth stretching open. Through it, Ben saw the backyard from their childhood, the swing set, the broken fence, the woods that had always loomed just beyond. But it was wrong. The grass was gray, the trees skeletal, and from beneath their roots, dozens of hands stretched upward, small and still. "They're waiting for you," Jacob said. "You can still fix it." Ben staggered back. "How? What do you want me to do?" Jacob reached into his coat and pulled out an object wrapped in red cloth. He held it out with both hands. Ben hesitated, then unwrapped it slowly. It was a glass jar filled with teeth, children's teeth, each one carved with a tiny rune, blackened with ash. Ben dropped it with a cry. The jar shattered but made no sound, only a soft exhale, like a breath released after centuries. Jacob didn't flinch. "You made the house hungry," he said. "Now you have to feed it." Ben backed into the far wall, heart slamming, eyes wild. "No, I won't hurt anyone. I won't make a new pact." "You don't have to," Jacob said. Then he smiled and disappeared. The attic dissolved. The floor dropped out from under Ben and he fell, tumbling through darkness, through scenes he half remembered. Morgan hiding in a closet, blood running from her palm, Lillian whispering beside a fire, the faceless woman holding Jacob beneath the bed. When he landed, it was soft, too soft. He sat up and found himself in the nursery, their old nursery, painted yellow and blue with clouds on the ceiling and the mobile still spinning, slow and broken. A crib sat in the corner, rocking gently even though the room was still. And there, sitting on the floor with her back to him, was Morgan. Ben rushed to her. "Morgan." She didn't turn, her head lolled slightly, and she was humming, no tune he recognized but haunting in its simplicity. He reached for her shoulder, and she turned around. Her face was sewn shut, not just her mouth, but her eyes too. Black thread crudely woven through flesh, seeping blood. She opened her mouth, not by will but by the ripping of stitches, and screamed. But the sound that came out wasn't hers, it was Ben's. He stumbled back as the room filled with whispers, echoing, circling, closing. "Feed the house," they hissed. "Fix the chain. Balance the debt." The mobile overhead spun faster and faster until the toys blurred. Ben crawled to the door, but it had vanished. Only the crib remained. He turned toward it, shaking. Inside was a baby, swaddled in dark cloth, face turned away. He reached in slowly. The baby turned its head. It had no face, just a smooth expanse of skin stretched tight over bone. Ben screamed. Then the room exploded into white light, and he was standing in the woods again, alone, barefoot. The trees around him were the same from his childhood, but burned, blackened, and charred. He recognized the trail that led down toward the lake, toward the heart of the ritual site. He had been brought back. The house had given him one final chance, and far ahead, just barely visible through the trees, stood a flickering shape. Morgan, waiting, or luring. And behind him, something else stirred. A second presence, closer, breathing on his neck. Ben didn't dare look back. Whatever was behind him wasn't meant to be seen. He could feel it, though, its presence like a magnetic field pressing into his spine, inching forward every time he blinked. The woods ahead were warped, the trees tall and narrow, sloping toward him like they too were being drawn in by that presence. He moved, slow at first, then faster, stumbling over roots and fallen branches, brushing against thorns that snagged at his skin and left dark red lines across his arms. Each step sank deeper into damp soil, as if the earth itself didn't want him to leave. But Morgan was ahead. She drifted through the trees like smoke, always just far enough that he couldn't see her face. Only the back of her head, her shoulders swaying gently with each step. Her white dress caught what little light filtered through the canopy, glowing faintly like moonlight on water. "Morgan," Ben called, his voice hoarse. She didn't stop. He pushed forward, lungs burning, heart drumming in his ears. Then she was gone again. No sound, no footprints, just vanished, like a breath held too long. Ben stumbled into a clearing. It took him a second to realize where he was. The lake. But not as it had been. The water was thick and black, reflecting no light. The dock had rotted into slivers, and the fire pit was gone, replaced by a circle of scorched ground and splintered wood. At the center stood a tree, twisted and gnarled, unlike anything native to this forest. Its bark was smooth like old flesh, and from its branches hung objects, dolls, bones, fragments of mirrors, all swaying with no wind. He stepped forward, unable to stop. The lake hissed as he approached, little ripples forming on its surface. "Morgan?" he whispered again. "You came back." The voice was behind him. He turned slowly. Lillian stood near the edge of the clearing. Her long black coat was coated in dust and ash, her hair tangled with leaves. Her eyes, those sharp, cold eyes, had changed. They were no longer human. They were hollow, bottomless, and hungry. "You didn't finish it," she said. Ben shook his head. "What are you talking about? The pact, the binding. You broke it halfway, ran before the debt could pass on." "I didn't know it was real," Lillian smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was something worse. "Pity. You never remembered, not fully. Not until now. The house. It only lets you forget when it suits its hunger." She stepped closer, and the dolls hanging from the tree began to spin, each one humming a different melody. "You opened the attic door, Ben. You dug up what was buried, and now it wants to eat again." Ben's fists clenched. "Where's Morgan? What did you do to her?" Lillian tilted her head. "Morgan never left. She's always been part of it. You both are. That's how the binding works." Then she raised her hand, and from the lake something rose. It wasn't a creature in the traditional sense. It had no form, not truly, just a shifting mass of darkness, shaped vaguely like a person. Arms too long, neck crooked, face a blank canvas save for two holes that bled black light. It crawled from the water on all fours, slow and deliberate, its movements unnatural, boneless. Ben stepped back. "What is that?" "That," Lillian said, "is the original debt. The one you inherited. The one Morgan tried to bury." The shadow thing reached the edge of the water and stood. It was taller than him. Its skin dripped into the ground like oil, and wherever it stepped, the earth smoked. "You made the pact when you were children," Lillian said, "but the house knew you weren't strong enough to finish it, so it waited. Let you grow, let you forget. And now you've remembered. It wants the last piece." Ben's mind reeled. "What do you mean?" "You," she said simply. "You were always the last piece." The shadow lunged. Ben dodged just in time, rolling into the roots of the strange tree. The shadow hissed, flickering like a flame in the wind, then righted itself and began moving again, slow but relentless. Lillian watched, unblinking. Ben scrambled to his feet and ran for the tree. If there was power here, if there was any way to fight back, it had to start there. He gripped one of the hanging dolls. Its eyes were buttons, its mouth sewn shut. As he touched it, a memory stabbed into his mind. Morgan, age 9, sitting beneath this very tree. Her hand cut, blood dripping onto a circle drawn in chalk and bones. Ben beside her, eyes wide, Lillian behind them, chanting. "I bind what is broken," Morgan had whispered. "I feed what is starving. I give it us." The memory shattered. Ben ripped the doll from the tree and hurled it at the shadow. It exploded in a burst of whispers, screams, laughter, crying. The shadow recoiled, limbs convulsing, black light searing into the ground. Lillian took a step back. Ben grabbed another doll, this one smaller, stitched with red thread. He tore it apart and flung the pieces into the air. The wind shifted. A howl erupted from the lake as hands began reaching from the water. Dozens, hundreds, all child-sized. They grabbed at the shadow, dragging it down, ripping chunks of it off in black, steaming globs. But it wasn't enough. The shadow broke free, howling without a mouth. It surged forward and wrapped around Ben's leg. Cold shot through him, cold so absolute it erased thought, and then a scream. But not his. The shadow recoiled again, this time because Morgan had appeared. She stood across the lake, barefoot, her dress soaked in blood, hair plastered to her face. In her hands was the jar of teeth, the one Jacob had given him. She opened it. The runes inside glowed like coals. "You want us?" she screamed. "Then take it all." She tipped the jar into the lake. The teeth hit the surface and ignited. The water caught flames, spiraling outward like veins of fire beneath black glass. The shadow shrieked, flailing, and its grip on Ben dissolved. Lillian screamed. The earth trembled. The sky turned red. Morgan stepped into the lake, eyes locked on Ben's. "I remember now," she said. "I remember everything." The fire swallowed her whole, and from the center of the lake, something else rose. Larger than the shadow. Older. Not a person. Not even a shape. Just hunger. Wearing the memory of skin. And it turned its face toward Ben. The lake was on fire, and the sky had forgotten what color it used to be. Ben lay on the ground, gasping for air as ash rained from above like black snow. Around him the forest groaned, not in the usual way trees creak in wind, but like something vast and buried had begun to stir beneath the surface. The flames over the water twisted in unnatural spirals, defying physics, rising high but never spreading beyond the edge of the lake. It was as if the forest held its breath, unwilling to let the fire pass. Morgan was gone. One moment she had stood there, hair soaked and eyes blazing, shouting into the flames. The next, the water had swallowed her, the fire burning brighter where she had vanished. Ben staggered to his feet. His jeans were torn and wet, his arms streaked with cuts and bruises. Somewhere in the struggle he had lost his shoes. Every breath tasted like smoke and copper. But he didn't care. He ran. Not away from the lake, but toward it. He didn't know what good it would do. Maybe he just wanted to see. Maybe he thought he could pull her back. But as his feet met the water's edge, the heat didn't burn. It welcomed him, beckoned him forward with invisible hands that whispered, "Come see what you left behind." He stepped into the shallows, and then the world changed. Not visually, not in the way nightmares shift with melting walls and blood-red skies, but in feeling. Like he had stepped through a thin layer of reality, a film separating before and after. The lake was gone. The flames were gone. The woods behind him no longer rustled. Silence. Perfect, crushing silence. He stood now in a narrow hallway, long, suffocating, with old wallpaper peeling off the walls and drooping The carpet beneath his feet was soaked and squelched with every step. The ceiling sloped unnaturally, pressing downward like the mouth of a funnel. Dim bulbs flickered above, casting shadows that twisted even when he stood still. The house. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was awake. At the end of the hallway stood a door. He approached slowly, fingers brushing along the cracked wallpaper. Symbols had been scratched into it, circles within circles, teeth drawn like flowers. A child's handwriting repeating a single phrase. "It watches from the wall. It watches from the wall. It watches." The door creaked open before he touched it. Inside was a room he didn't remember, though it felt impossibly familiar. A child's bedroom. The furniture was small, too small, like it belonged to a dollhouse scaled up just enough for discomfort. The wallpaper here was pale blue with faded clouds. In the center of the room stood a bed, neatly made. On it sat a girl. Morgan, but not as she was. She was 8, maybe 9, hair in uneven pigtails, dirt smudged on her cheeks, wearing a red hoodie that hung too large for her shoulders. She looked up at him. "You're late," she said. Ben froze. "What is this?" "You always come late," the little Morgan said. "That's why it gets so hungry." He stepped forward, heart thudding. "You're not real. Neither are you. Not here." A flash, like a shutter click, went through the room. Suddenly the walls were bleeding, not pouring blood, not dripping in torrents, just weeping. Long, thin lines of red seeping from cracks, soaking into the floor. The bed melted into a pool of ash. The girl vanished, and the shadows opened their eyes. There were faces in the dark, hundreds. Some pressed into the walls like figures caught in ice. Others hung from the ceiling, grinning without mouths. All of them watched him with a kind of grotesque anticipation, as if they knew something he didn't, something he'd forgotten again. He turned, ready to bolt, but the hallway was gone. In its place, the living room of the lake house, frozen in time. The furniture was exactly as he remembered from the day they arrived, clean, quiet, untouched. But there was no light, no sound. Just that sensation of being trapped inside a replica of a life he'd once lived. Ben stepped forward. The floorboards groaned under his weight. On the wall above the fireplace hung a mirror. He caught a glimpse of himself and stopped. The reflection wasn't right. He looked older, grayer. His eyes were hollow, like someone had scooped out the soul behind them. He touched his cheek. The reflection didn't move. Then it smiled. Not him. The thing in the mirror smiled, bearing rows of tiny teeth, too many for a human mouth. Ben. The voice came from the mirror, from inside the mirror. You always choose her. I don't understand, Ben whispered. Oh, but you do, it said. You remember now. You just don't want to admit it. The mirror cracked. One fracture, then another. A spiderweb of splinters split across the glass until the center bulged outward, pushing like something behind it wanted to crawl through. Ben stumbled back, but the room spun. The furniture melted, the walls twisted, and the ceiling stretched upward into impossible darkness. He fell, not physically, but mentally, plummeting through layers of memory and dream, through flashes of a summer he had tried to bury. Morgan screaming in the woods, blood on a tree stump, a sigil drawn in chalk, Lillian whispering, "It only takes one to seal it, but two to break it." And then he hit the ground. Dirt, cold and wet. He was outside again, night. The stars were gone, the sky a thick smear of gray and red. In front of him stood the lake house, except it wasn't the same. It had grown. New wings, new windows, twisted chimneys that poured smoke into a sky that didn't move. The walls pulsed like muscle. The door was open, waiting. Ben stood. Behind him, something moved. He turned and saw Morgan, but not the child and not the girl from the lake. This Morgan was wrong. She hovered slightly above the ground, hair floating as if underwater, eyes pure black. Her mouth opened slowly, revealing no tongue, no teeth, just darkness. And from that mouth came a voice that wasn't hers. "You broke the circle, Benjamin. Now you finish it." Ben stepped back, but the lake house pulsed again, and the door began to close. If he didn't move now, it would shut forever. He sprinted toward it. As he crossed the threshold, he heard one last whisper behind him, spoken in Morgan's true voice. Small, sad, distant. "Please, don't let it wear my skin." The door slammed shut behind him, and the lights inside the house all turned on. Ben stood in the doorway, frozen, his breath ragged. The house was no longer a structure of wood and plaster. It was alive. The floor beneath him throbbed faintly, a slow pulse like the beat of a heart buried in stone. The lights, though all turned on, offered no comfort. They cast no warmth. Instead, they exposed everything. The hairline cracks in the ceiling crawling like veins, the water damage that ran down the walls like long-dried tears, and the subtle movement in the shadows, like something pacing just out of sight. He whispered her name. "Morgan?" No answer. He stepped inside. The door slammed behind him with a shudder that traveled up his spine. The living room was exactly as before. Couch, bookshelves, the faint scent of mildew and lake water. But something was different. It wasn't just the visuals. It was the feeling, a pressure in the air, like the weight of a storm waiting to break. As he moved deeper, his footsteps echoed oddly, too loud, too delayed. The hallway ahead seemed to stretch longer than it should, like the house was slowly changing behind his back, warping to confuse him, to consume him. Every time he blinked, the paintings on the wall seemed to shift slightly, once of landscapes, now smeared faces in agony, mouths open in eternal screams. In the dining room, the long wooden table had been set for dinner, plates of food steaming hot, untouched. Glasses filled with red wine, or was it blood, sat at each place. The chairs were all occupied, but not by people, effigies. Figures made of straw, sticks, and bones. Each wore a different mask, some porcelain, some wooden, others nothing more than stretched animal hide with eyes cut crudely into them. They sat stiffly, heads tilted in Ben's direction, as if watching him even without eyes. He backed away slowly. One of the figures turned its head, just slightly, enough to let him know it wasn't just for show. Ben bolted. He ran through the kitchen, where the fridge buzzed like a dying animal and the oven door hung open, smoke rising. On the counter, knives stood upright, stabbed into wood in perfect alignment. On the floor, a chalk circle had been drawn around a single black feather. He didn't stop to examine it. Through the kitchen and into the den where the fireplace roared with green flames and photos on the mantel bled ink. There was one of him and Morgan, taken on the first day they arrived, but his face had been scratched out entirely. Hers was distorted, twisted into a snarl that looked more like a predator than a girl. He turned, heart hammering in his chest, and took the stairs 2 at a time. Each step screamed under his weight. Upstairs, the corridor was lined with doors. Too many doors, more than the house should have. Some were ajar, revealing flickers of scenes that didn't belong. A snow-covered field under a black sun, a classroom filled with children facing the wrong direction, a hospital hallway where something dragged a body by its hair. He shut them all as he passed. One door at the end stood wide open, humming softly with a dull red light. He stepped inside. It was her room. The bed was made. The curtains fluttered, though the windows were shut. A notebook lay open on the desk, pages turning slowly on their own. He approached it, recognizing her handwriting, careful, slanted, too mature for her age. If I become it, you have to stop me. Don't listen to the mere version of me. I dreamed of a hallway made of teeth. It said, the lake binds, the blood opens. Ben flipped the page. A rough drawing filled the sheet. It was of the house, but with roots extending below it, curling downward into a void filled with eyes. The basement, the real heart of the place. A soft knock echoed behind him. He turned. Morgan stood in the doorway. Not the child, not the monster, the real one. Wet hair clinging to her face, blood on her hands, eyes wide and terrified. Ben, she whispered, it's still in me. He rushed to her, pulled her into a hug, trembling. She was cold, ice cold, and shaking, but she was real. He could feel her breath against his chest. He could smell the lake on her skin. I thought you were gone, he whispered. I was, but it let me go. Only for now. She pulled back, her eyes glistening. It's in the basement. That's where it's feeding. That's where it started. Ben nodded. We finished this together. Morgan flinched. No, you have to finish it. I can't go back down there. Why not? She didn't answer. He knew the truth even before she said it. You've been marked. She nodded. Downstairs the house groaned. The sound didn't come from the wood but from something beneath it, like a chorus of mouths whispering in unison, ancient and hungry. Ben helped her to the bed, wrapped her in a blanket, kissed her forehead. I'll come back. Morgan grabbed his wrist. Ben, if it tries to look like me again, don't believe it. He hesitated. How will I know? She looked him in the eye. The real me never asks you to stay. The real me always tells you to run. Ben stood and turned toward the hall. The descent into the basement was like walking into a throat. The air grew thick, damp, and fetid. Mold covered the walls, and the stairs creaked as if each step was a warning. At the bottom, the room spread wide, carved from earth, lit by flickering candles embedded into the soil. Symbols coated every surface. Blood-drawn spirals, teeth embedded in stone, bones arranged like sigils. In the center was a pit, a deep pulsing hole in the ground, rimmed with red clay and whispering things he couldn't understand. He approached slowly. From within, something climbed. It wasn't monstrous in the usual sense. It looked like him. Perfectly, except for the smile. Wide, constant, dead. Ben, the creature said in his voice, he doesn't need you anymore. He stepped back. It rose fully, pulling itself from the pit like molasses spilling upward, shimmering in the candlelight. Its eyes were pools of black, its fingers too long, its voice almost convincing. "We finished the ritual years ago," it said. "You just never accepted it." Ben clenched his fists. "You're not me," it laughed. "You said that before, every time, and every time you come back to finish what we started." The pit behind it throbbed, a sound like heartbeat and waves crashing. The smell of rot and copper filled the air. Ben reached into his coat and pulled out the object Morgan had hidden there. A shard of mirror wrapped in cloth, humming with quiet energy. He held it toward the creature. "Let's see if your reflection can lie as well as your tongue." The creature hissed. Light from the mirror caught its face, and for a split second it changed. Not into Ben, not into Morgan, but into something ancient and insectile. Rows of eyes, rows of jaws, a shape that shouldn't exist in this world. It lunged. Ben screamed, and the mirror exploded in his hand. Light, shards, blood, and then nothing. Just black. And a voice whispering from the dark, impossibly close. "Now, you've seen your true face." They said silence was peaceful, but this silence, this complete suffocating stillness, was a lie. It rang in Ben's ears like a scream that never stopped. He opened his eyes, or thought he did. There was only black, not darkness like a room without light, but the thick, tangible kind, a presence. It was cold, yet he couldn't feel his body. It was loud, yet no sound reached him. Then a voice broke through, whisper thin, feminine, familiar. "Ben." "Morgan." He reached for it, flailing in the dark, but his limbs weren't responding. It was like his body had been unraveled, like he was thought alone, suspended in whatever liminal space the house had coughed him into. And still, the voice came again. Closer this time. "Ben, listen to me." A pinprick of light flickered in the void, then another, until suddenly eyes surrounded him. Dozens, hundreds, all open, all unblinking, all watching. Embedded in nothingness, drifting across this black expanse like stars on a night sky, drawn by something wrong. And among them, her face. Morgan, but not entirely. Her features floated disjointed, her voice still clear, but her eyes, not hers. They glowed amber, too deep, too knowing. "This is where it keeps us," she said, between the breath and the thought. "In the space you don't remember dreaming." Ben tried to speak, but no words came. He tried to scream and heard only silence. Morgan moved closer, her face fading in and out of form. "You broke the seal too early. The mirror was supposed to reflect truth, not force it. Now the house doesn't know who you are anymore, and neither do you." He felt something shift beneath him, a sudden sense of falling upward. Images bled into his mind, fractured visions of past and present, twisting around each other like vines strangling a corpse. The lake, the cabin, Morgan bleeding in the tub, the effigies at the table, the creature wearing his face, the pit. "The pit," he screamed again, and this time it echoed, not in sound, but in effect. The void rippled, the eyes blinked, and somewhere, far below, or was it above? The house moved. He was still inside it, just not in the way that made sense anymore. Suddenly, the black receded, like curtains yanked open, and Ben gasped, lungs seizing with sudden cold air. He was lying on the basement floor. The pit was gone. The candles extinguished. The walls were stone again, normal, lifeless. His hand was still bleeding from the shattered mirror, glass embedded deep in his palm. He sat up, vision spinning. "Morgan?" he croaked. No answer. He stumbled toward the stairs, half crawling, half dragging himself. His legs screamed in protest. His mind reeled. Each step he climbed felt like resistance against something invisible, like the air thickened around him the closer he got to the main floor. When he reached the top, he almost collapsed. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then came a sound. The familiar chime of the old grandfather clock in the foyer, a sound that hadn't played in weeks. It was 3:13, a detail, one Morgan had written in her journal, a time that meant something. It always comes at 3:13? Ben turned. Every door on the first floor was now open, and every one of them led to the same room, a single space that shouldn't fit inside the house. It was endless, circular, the walls covered in mirrors from floor to ceiling. Candles lined the base of each one, their flames swaying toward the center. And in the middle, sitting in a wooden chair, was Morgan. She wore a white gown soaked in ash, her hair wet and trailing down her back. Her eyes were closed, her lips moved, repeating something silently. Ben stepped forward. "Morgan?" She didn't react. He looked at the mirrors. Each one reflected her and him. But in each reflection, something was wrong. His posture slightly bent, his eyes bleeding black. Her smile twisted, her limbs elongated. Then one of the reflections turned to face him directly and spoke. "Welcome to the final threshold." Ben flinched. The real Morgan remained unmoved. The reflection's smile widened. "You've already lost yourself. This is only the formality." Ben stepped back. Another mirror reflection blinked, and now its eyes were empty sockets, weeping tar. Another's hands were claws. Another had no mouth. And then one of them, the far left, stepped out of its mirror. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was real. Ben scrambled to pull the jagged piece of glass from his pocket, but it crumbled into dust. "No weapon, no protection," the thing grinned. "The house doesn't need your body, just your memory of being alive." Behind him, Morgan began to whisper louder, her eyes still closed, voice shaky but rhythmic, a chant. Ben turned back. "Morgan, wake up." She didn't, but the air began to pulse. The mirrors shook, the candle flames rose, forming shapes, runic symbols drawn in fire. The creature paused, glancing at her, and screamed. It was a shriek that shattered glass, not the mirrors, but inside Ben's head. He fell to his knees, nose bleeding, ears ringing. The reflections cracked. Morgan chanted louder. Then she opened her eyes, not amber, but blue. Real. Present. She met Ben's gaze and mouthed one word. "Run." The flames erupted into a wall, encircling them both. The creature lunged but was engulfed. The mirrors shattered simultaneously, and for a moment, it was as if the world turned inside out, walls folding, light bending, gravity inverting. Ben reached for Morgan's hand, but he wasn't fast enough. The fire swallowed her whole, and the last thing he saw before everything went white was her smile. Not a possessed grin, not a frightened plea, but a peaceful smile, like she had finally done what she came here to do. The light didn't fade, it collapsed, like reality had been folded shut like a book. When Ben opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the mirror room, nor in the house as he remembered it. He was standing in the forest, but not the forest outside, not their forest. This one was wrong. The trees bled shadow. They bent toward him like voyeurs, branches arching overhead as if whispering things he couldn't understand. The leaves on the ground writhed like worms in moonlight. The air smelled of rot and old iron. Time was broken here. Each breath came slow. Each blink felt delayed. He turned. Behind him stood the house. But it wasn't his house anymore. It was older, twisted, growing out of the ground like a tumor. The wood blackened and warped. The windows nothing but hollow sockets of glass. Moss clung to the beams like veins. A windmill turned without breeze, creaking as though in mourning. The house pulsed faintly, like it was alive and sleeping. Ben took one shaky step backward. Then a voice spoke from the woods. "You're still in its mouth, you know." He turned, fists clenched, ready for anything. But what stepped from the shadows wasn't a creature. It was Morgan, or a version of her. She was dressed in black, barefoot, mud covering her calves. Her eyes were the same piercing blue as before, but her skin bore the cracks of porcelain. She was real, and she wasn't. As if a dream had taken her shape but forgotten some of the rules of the waking world. Ben didn't say her name. He knew better now. "What is this?" he asked instead, voice hoarse. She tilted her head between the part of the house it doesn't show you unless you ask for too much. He stepped forward. "You burned. I saw. That was a moment. This is another. Time's not linear when the house gets inside your mind." Ben clenched his fists harder. "Why are you helping me now?" Her expression softened, just slightly. "Because I remember who I was, and because you're the last thread. If you leave now, it can't complete the cycle. It can't feed again. Then show me how to get out." Morgan stepped closer, stopping only inches from him. "You can't leave, Ben. Not yet. There's one more room. The real room. The one beneath the basement. You touched it when you touched the pit. But you didn't see it." Ben shook his head. "There was nothing. Just black. That's what it wants you to think. But beneath that black is the seed." He didn't understand. She continued, voice low. "The house wasn't built around something. Something was built around it. And every person who dies inside, every memory, every name, it takes them, twists them, grafts them to its roots. That's why it needed you." "Why me?" She stepped even closer, and for the first time, Ben noticed the flickering outline around her, a shimmer like heat mirage. "Because you were born in this house." His heart froze. "No, my parents bought it when I was 6. We moved in. You were born here, Ben. Not in this house. In this place. Your mother tried to run while pregnant, tried to flee the binding, but she never left. The force turned her around. Your birth wasn't a beginning. It was a continuation." Ben stepped back. The world tilted. "No," he whispered. "You're lying. I wish I was." Suddenly, the trees behind her groaned. The earth cracked, and something huge shifted beneath the forest floor, like a whale turning in deep water. Morgan glanced over her shoulder. "It knows you're close." Ben swallowed hard. "So what do I do?" "You find the root," she said. "You find what's buried. You destroy it. Not the house, not the walls, but the memory underneath it all. And then," she offered a sad smile, "then you wake up. Or you don't." She placed something cold in his hand, a shard of black glass, shimmering faintly with light from inside, not a reflection, but something older. "Use this when you see the truth," she said. "Only then." The forest cracked. Morgan's body flickered. Her eyes glazed over. "Go," she whispered, "before it replaces me again." And then she was gone, snapped from existence like breath across a mirror. Ben turned, the forest peeling open behind him like paper. A path formed in thorns and bone, leading toward the house. The real one, the origin. He ran. Branches clawed at him, shadows chased him, whispers bled from every tree. "You were born in the mouth, you will die in the root. You are what was promised." He reached the door. It opened on its own. Inside, the house was pure rot. The walls peeled like scabbed flesh. Furniture moved on their own. Portraits bled down the canvas. His feet left prints in the floorboards, not of mud but ash. He followed the hallway, down, past the basement, through a trapdoor he didn't know existed, and deeper still, until he reached a chamber carved of bone and salt, lit by a single pulsing heart suspended in vines. It beat like a drum. At the center was a cradle. Inside it, a baby, crying, alone. But when Ben stepped closer, he realized the baby wasn't alive. It was him. An effigy, made of hair and teeth and bone and wood. The root, the memory. His. He took the shard of black glass, kneeled, and raised it over the effigy. Then, from behind, a hand gripped his shoulder. Not Morgan's. Something else. Something wearing her face. And a voice, colder than anything he'd ever known, whispered into his ear. "You found it. Now bury yourself with it. Thank you for joining me on this descent into darkness. Stories like these are more than just fiction. They're echoes of our fears, shadows of our past, and warnings carved into the corners of forgotten places. You made it this far. You've braved something twisted, something buried, and something terrifyingly familiar. And for that, I thank you. To those who shared their theories, stayed up late, or listened with the lights off, you are the reason these stories breathe. Your curiosity is the flame that keeps the horrors awake. Special thanks to the unseen hands behind the scenes, the minds that inspired, supported, and shaped every chilling word and haunting idea. This story wouldn't exist without you. But remember, some houses aren't built on land, some roads never really end, and some memories, they remember you too. Until the next nightmare, sleep with one eye open.